Hi guys, welcome to Strength Reversed. My name is Amy, and today I'm going to talk about boundaries. Now I talked about boundaries before when I did a VR to Lupa Moon's Be Kind, and I said I would do some more videos about boundaries. So I have for you today part one of my, I guess I would call them my tarot boundaries. These are the boundaries that I have spelled out for myself when I read for other people. And there's going to be a part two when I'll explain that. I'm a little bit out of it. If you see any smoke, it's because I'm smudging the bejesus out of my surroundings. I had the flu the end of last week, and I was a little bit miffed because I was doing all the right things to not get the flu, and I got the flu, and it's been grueling. I still feel a little bit tired, and now the pollen is hitting, and so I feel a little bit foggy and out of it. But I wrote myself a crap ton of notes, and so let's get going. Now, if you read tarot for other people, I think it is very necessary for you to sit down and write out what your boundaries are. And boundaries are changing, they are dynamic, they are ever evolving and ongoing. So you could really sit down and update that list of boundaries every so often, for sure every couple of years. But a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about overlap, the categories overlap, but also there are things that I have learned just by experiencing stuff that didn't really work out and experiencing situations that weren't very productive. And so that kind of went down on the list of boundaries. I guess you would call them rules that I have for when I read tarot cards for other people. And sometimes, you know, when I read them for myself, I have some other kinds of boundaries. I'm dividing this video into two parts. So I have two categories of boundaries, I guess. The first category are boundaries with the querent. And then the second category, which I'll do in another video, are boundaries with the cards themselves, or maybe I should say with my tarot guides. And I'll also talk about how I personally set boundaries with guides if you feel like that's something you might need to do. And again, a lot of these things overlap and are related, and they're not anything that I expect everyone to agree on. These are just based on my personal experience and how I come to the cards, the style of reading that I like to do. You know, everyone's different and everyone's bringing their own background to the cards. Some people are, you know, work with spreads exclusively. Some people fly by the seat of their pants. Some people will do readings about certain topics and other people won't. So everyone has to figure out what works for them and where their outer edges lie. But I think it's so important that if you are reading for others, especially for payment, that you figure this out, that you are very clear with yourself, and that you have a plan to kind of wiggle out of that boundary being challenged. You know, you're able to get out of that situation. So my first boundary when I read for others is no observers. I do not allow audience members to attend your tarot reading. And that is because I am going to tell you whatever I see. I got very clear on this boundary because there was a situation where I had someone coming to me for a reading, and she brought with her a good friend of hers, and she came to me for several readings and would always bring this good friend. And it kept coming up that she was like big time deceiving this friend. But I thought, why the hell would she bring this friend with her if that were true? And so I kind of thought, well, that must be a mistake. But it wasn't. That's what was happening. And I told her finally, look, you want to bring this friend? I'm going to put it all out there. So I put an end to that. But I don't feel like it's my job to sugarcoat or lie to people, only to present the information in an empowering way, in a gentle way, in, you know, hopefully a tactful way. But I'm not going to, I don't like feeling like I can't say what I see because you brought your boyfriend there and it's not maybe the most flattering about him. So I learned that I just don't like hangers on. There are some venues, like when you go to the fair, the, you know, medieval fair or something, people are just there with their family and friends. And so you're really, a lot of times you don't get a one-on-one reading, but it's more of a casual, abbreviated kind of reading where you might need to steer someone to, you know, maybe you need another reading just for yourself. So those kinds of things are I don't love those kinds of venues for just that reason. It just doesn't really fit with my style of reading, and I feel like I have to fudge that boundary a little, which I don't like. Now, sometimes in my tarot meetup, there is a whole group watching a reading because we're exchanging readings, and you know, that person knows that, and they know, the querent knows this group of people, and so that's just a different situation. But for a one-on-one reading, I don't let people observe because it's just not productive. No observers. Number 2 is I have to set a fee. And I didn't used to set a fee because I was told do the first 100 readings for free and then start charging. But I knew it was time to start charging when I would feel a little bit taken advantage of if I read for free. To me, there has to be an exchange of energy. It doesn't have to be money energy, but there has to be some sort of exchange so that I feel completely good about the reading. Now, sometimes I will offer a friend a reading. If I feel like that's something I want to do, I'll say, hey, let's pull out the cards. But if they've come to me asking for a reading, there needs to be an exchange. I have found that people just don't value free readings as much. They don't value the advice as much. And that doesn't mean that no one values free readings. That's not true. But free readings often attract a different kind of clientele. They attract what I would call lower energy questions. Like, is he gonna call me? Just stuff that's not very empowering. It's not very productive. And it tends to be more about trying to control a situation with someone else rather than to find something out about yourself. I did free readings for a summer for Biddy Tarot's free reading, you know, online free readings, and overall it was a positive experience, but I couldn't do it for any longer than those few months just because it was a little bit taxing. Now, sometimes I'll have a friend come over and they want a reading and they'll bring me lunch or something. And that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be money necessarily, but there does have to be an exchange. My personal boundary that goes along with that is I don't barter for readings. So, for example, I don't do like, you give me a reading and I'll give you a reading some other time, because it just kind of never works out. And one person is always left owing the other person, and then the other person kind of has to collect the debt. It just doesn't ever work out. I don't like that feeling. And so it has to be like same time, exchange something. That's it. And that's just the way it has to be. Otherwise, I don't feel good about the reading. Number 3 encompasses a lot of odds and ends, but I just call it the reader runs the reading and the querent owns the reading. So what I mean by the reader runs the reading is that I choose how I'm going to interact with the cards during the reading. So I'm going to choose whether the querent shuffles. I'm going to choose how many cards I turn over, whether I use a tarot spread or not. And of course, the querent has some input. Maybe they've bought a certain spread and that's the reading that they purchased, or you know, maybe they really want to shuffle or something. I don't know. But for me, this has taken some practice. Learning how to run the reading and explain to the querent, here's what I'm going to do, instead of, you know, I've had experiences where people just kind of started grabbing cards and flipping things over and saying, okay, well, what does that mean? But that's not really how it works. And so I need to run it in the way that makes sense for me so that I can give them the information that they need. At the same time, this also encompasses the stump the reader thing. I will stop immediately if you are going to stare blankly at me, defiantly, like you tell me what's happening. I just won't play that game at all. On the other hand, we have the querent owns the reading. And what I mean by that is that it is the querent who has the choice to share the reading with other people or not. It is the querent who has the responsibility of making their own decisions in life. It is the querent whose responsibility it is to see the necessary professionals if they need information about health or finances or legalities, etc. So I know what kinds of questions that I am comfortable answering, and I know what kinds of questions I'm not comfortable answering, and so that's where I work with the querent to kind of hone their question so that it's something that we're both completely understanding and comfortable with. That one's a little nebulous. It makes sense in my mind. And it does, there are lots of odds and ends under there. Number 4 is there are no emergency or same-day readings. And once your friends know you read tarot, or you put your name out there as someone who is a tarot reader, you get lots of emergency requests, like, you know, relationship stuff or things like that. But I don't do readings the same day, and that is because I feel like the querent is not in a space to really receive the information. When you're in crisis mode, you kind of don't, you only want to hear one specific answer. And so a lot of times it's not very productive to do a reading when the querent's in crisis mode. And at the same time, I don't think, for me as a reader, I can't drop everything, you know, after work without decompressing and do a tarot reading. I'm just not in that space either. I need time to kind of collect my thoughts and get into a certain frame of mind. And so I don't do spur of the moment, gotta know right now kinds of readings, because those really, when I'm under duress, that it's just not a good result. And the last boundary, but this is the most important, and I know a lot of people will disagree with this one, but for me, you must ask a question out loud if you want me to read for you. There are lots of people, to me, a surprising amount of people who are fine with, like, you don't have to tell me the question, but I can pull what covers you and what crosses you and maybe try to, you know, figure out in a general way what we're talking about. but I don't think it makes for the best kind of reading when I'm flying blind, because there are any number of nuances, of shades of meaning to one particular tarot card. So you need to put it in perspective. You need a context for this meaning. Otherwise, you just can regurgitate the textbook meanings of the cards. So if you're not willing to have a conversation, because to me, tarot is a conversation with your higher self. And if you're not willing to get personal or to have that conversation, I think sometimes it's kind of a sneaky way to dodge personal accountability when you don't want to say your question out loud. But, you know, 9 out of 10 times, the first thing I do in a reading is help the querent refocus their question so that it is the most productive and the most empowering. And after that, you know, if you want specific information, then we need to put this in context. If you went to the doctor and said, I don't feel good, but you're the doctor, you tell me what's wrong, the doctor could give you general information. They could check in and check your vitals and tell you, well, you're probably not dying. It's like nothing serious. You know, your throat seems a little inflamed. Maybe you have a cold. Okay? But if you go to the doctor and put your symptoms in context and let them know what's happening, then they know they can limit the scope of their focus. So they know what tests to run. They know what questions to ask you. They can put it in focus so you get a lot more specific, detailed information. If you just want me to guess and tell you, you know, rote memorization kind of meanings, that to me is not really worth it. So you have to ask a question out loud. And that goes back to no hangers on. If you don't want to, some people are inhibited by bringing their mom or bringing their friend or something like that. And so they just don't get as much out of the reading as they would. Okay, those are my 5 main boundaries for reading for other people. I'd be interested to know what your boundaries are if you read for others, what your personal guidelines consist of. So make a video or say something in the comments, because, you know, I really think when I talk about this with people, it kind of helps me hone what I think. And these are always changing. They are ever evolving, and it's a work in progress. It takes a lot of practice to read for other people in a way that works for everyone, because, you know, you learn something new every time you read for others, but you do need it to be something that is functional for you so that you can really give the querent the most empowering reading. Make sure you like or subscribe, and I'm going to make a part 2, which is the other kind of category of boundaries, which are boundaries with the cards and with my tarot guides and how I talk to them. So thanks, guys. Let me know what you think about boundaries in the comments. Bye.